Welcome to this deep dive. We're here to explore some fascinating topics, really get you that essential understanding. And today, we're looking at something I think many people feel intuitively, this enduring idea that music has the power to heal.
Yeah, it definitely does. Across so many cultures, different times in history, people just seem to turn to music, don't they? For comfort or to lift their spirits.
Or even sometimes they thought for actual physical problems.
Exactly. It's a really remarkable and persistent belief.
So in this exploration, we're going to delve into some historical perspectives, specifically looking at music's therapeutic potential within, well, three distinct traditions: India, Judaism, and Islam.
Right.
Our aim is really to uncover how these cultures understood this connection, the maybe surprising ways they used music in their practices, and some of the really intriguing concepts that came out of it.
Exactly. We've looked through the historical accounts, trying to pull out the core ideas for you and maybe some of those aha moments.
To give you a focused understanding of this really rich history, without getting totally bogged down in every single detail.
Good plan.
So let's start in India. Let's unpack their sort of ancient relationship with music and healing.
Okay. Well, the connection between music and healing in India, it goes way back, really early times. You find ancient Indian writings linking music not just to, aesthetic enjoyment, but directly to medicine and how the human body works.
Yeah.
Especially around the origin of sound itself.
The origin of sound. Interesting.
Yeah, and there was this noticeable interest in the psychology of music, even way back then, and their foundational theories.
But what's kind of interesting or maybe surprising is that when you actually look at the classical Indian texts, the ones on musicology, or their traditional medicine system, Ayurveda,
right,
you don't find tons of explicit discussion about music therapy like we might think of it today. I remember reading about a musicologist, I think in Mysore, who searched specifically for this stuff and found, well, not much direct material.
That's a really key point, yeah. While maybe a formal field called music therapy didn't exist in those exact terms, the idea of sound and music being therapeutic is definitely there.
Okay.
It's often just woven into other practices, like take mantras, for example.
Oh, right, mantra.
These specific sacred sounds or utterances, they were seen as crucial in classical Indian medicine, actually listed as remedies, even for things like poisoning in major medical texts.
Wow. So the sound itself, structured in a specific way, was thought to have a direct effect. And this links back to even earlier traditions, the Vedic ones, right?
Precisely. Yeah, the Vedic tradition with its big emphasis on charms, incantations, ritual storytelling. That's kind of an earlier phase of healing practices in India.
Okay.
And the later medical systems, the more sort of empirical ones, they still acknowledge that tradition, which suggests this ongoing belief in the power of sound and ritual for well-being.
And those classical medical texts, like the Karaka Samhita, they actually broke down different types of therapy, didn't they? And one seems to hit right on the mind.
Yes, exactly. The Karaka Samhita talks about three main therapeutic approaches.
Okay.
There's Daivavyapashraya, relying on spiritual or, let's say, unseen forces.
Okay.
Then Yuktavyapashraya, that's the rational approach, using diet, medicines.
Standard stuff.
Right. And then Sattvavachaya, which focuses squarely on mental well-being, basically guiding the mind away from harmful things. And commentators have pointed out that even the first one, Daivavyapashraya, the spiritual one, it recognized how much a patient's mental state affected their overall health. So it's quite a holistic view, even then.
That is remarkable, recognizing that mind-body thing so early.
Yeah.
And music wasn't just for formal therapy settings, was it? It sounds like it popped up in everyday life too, for well-being.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. You find examples of music being used just to create a positive, supportive environment, say for newborns and their mothers.
Nice.
And even more specifically, drums were actually prescribed, along with physical treatments, mind you, as a way to counteract snake poisoning.
Drums against snake poison. Wow.
Yeah. And, music was also listed among the 64 arts, showing it was important for a cultured life. It was even seen as a good quality for people caring for the sick.
That really shows how integrated it was, doesn't it, into their whole picture of health and life. And not just for happy times. You mentioned even digestion was linked to sound.
That's right. This Sutra Samhita, another major text, it recommended enjoying soft, pleasant sounds after eating to help digestion. And it advised avoiding harsh or loud sounds then. So yeah, an early awareness that what you hear can affect your body's functions.
Okay, so fast forward a bit into the medieval period. It sounds like the music theorists then start digging deeper into the physical side of music, using these medical ideas.
Exactly. Theorists like Sarngadeva, his big text is the Sakhitarnakara, they gave incredibly detailed descriptions of human anatomy and the physiological origin of musical sound.
Physiological origin.
Yeah, drawing on ideas from Ayurveda, from yoga, from Tantra. They basically saw the human body as a kind of musical instrument, explaining how air moved through different parts to make different sounds.
It's almost like they were trying to find a scientific basis for music's power, linking it right to our physical selves. And then there's that really key concept, rasa, that seems central to the emotional side, right?
Oh, yes, rasa theory. It's absolutely fundamental to Indian aesthetics.
Right.
It suggests that music, like other arts, can evoke specific emotional states. They call them bhavas in the listener. And this leads to a really deep, meaningful aesthetic experience. It's like tasting these emotional flavors.
Tasting emotional flavors, I like that. And the rags, the melodic structures in Indian music, how do they fit in? They sound like more than just scale.
Oh, much more. Ragas are these internalized melodic structures, but they have really distinct identities. So distinct, they've even been compared to visual icons. A listener can just instantly recognize a particular raga when they hear it. And there are these old traditions of actually personifying ragas, through paintings or poems that capture their unique personalities.
So the music isn't just random notes, it's drawing on these established frameworks that already carry emotional, maybe even spiritual weight. And this idea of order seems to keep coming up, doesn't it? Music influencing order, right back to the Vedic chants.
Precisely. That belief that music can influence order is ancient. Those Vedic chants with the sacrifices. They were seen as vital for maintaining Rhoda. Yeah, in Vedic thought, that's like the fundamental order, the harmony of the whole universe. And the Saman, the hymn, was crucial for that.
Okay.
And later there was this strong tradition saying that art music actually came from the Samaveda, one of the main Vedic texts, which really underlines its sacred origins and why performing it correctly was so important for keeping cosmic balance.
It's fascinating how often these old traditions give divine origins to art forms, isn't it? It just adds this whole other layer of meaning and power. And then there's the devotional side. Music is worship.
Yes, definitely. In the non-Vedic traditions, and post-Vedic ones too, the theistic ones, music became a really important way to worship upasana. You see it really clearly in the Bhakti tradition, in Hinduism, but also in Buddhism and Jainism, though maybe their approaches were a bit different because of their views on sensory stuff.
Right. And all this thinking about music, its connection to philosophy, culture, it's written down in texts like the Natya Shastra. Is that correct?
That's right. The Natya Shastra is really foundational for Indian aesthetics. Music was seen as a key part of drama in that text. And it's where those early theories about rasa, about the psychological impact of art, were first really worked out and written down. That's kind of the start of a formal field of study they call Sangita Shastra, the science of music.
Okay. Now, no deep dive is complete without some good stories, and it sounds like India has some pretty amazing folk tales about music's power for good and bad.
Oh, absolutely. There are these tales about demons being tormented by just badly played music.
Really?
Yeah, showing the belief that if music lacks skill or the right intention, it could actually cause suffering. And then there's the very famous story of Naik Gopal singing Raga Deepak.
Fire raga.
The one believed to generate fire, exactly. And maybe a more recent anecdote, though still amazing, about a musician who supposedly predicted World War II just based on people singing certain ragas incorrectly.
Whoa.
These stories really show you the kind of profound power people attributed to music, in the popular imagination.
Those are incredible. And then there's that tantalizing mention of a lost manuscript, the Ragachikitsa, which means raga therapeutics.
Yes. That title alone is so suggestive, isn't it?
Yeah.
It implies there was once a documented system for using specific ragas for medical treatment.
But it's lost.
It's lost, unfortunately. But just knowing it existed hints that people were trying to practically apply the qualities of ragas, their clarity, their uplifting nature for actual healing.
So if we try to wrap up the Indian tradition overall, what are the main threads, the key insights into how they saw music and well-being?
Well, to summarize, I'd probably point to three main things in this kind of classical Indian view. First, that ritual power of music.
Right.
Maintaining cosmic and social order, warding off bad stuff coming right out of the Vedic roots. Second, that aesthetic model of rasa music, evoking these deep emotional experiences. And third, the physiological model, connecting music directly to bodily health through its impact on our physical and mental makeup.
Okay, that's a great summary. Let's shift now. Let's turn towards the Jewish and Muslim traditions. It really is striking, isn't it, how even across these really different cultural landscapes, you find these recurring ideas about music and healing.
It really is.
Yeah.
As the music therapist Chava Sekele has pointed out, certain basic musical principles just seem to pop up in healing rituals across a huge range of cultures. One key idea is using like heightened sensory input, especially sound, to deliberately shift someone's state of balance. You see that a lot in ecstatic ceremonies.
So using strong rhythms, powerful sounds to kind of shake things up, create a shift in consciousness.
Exactly. And Sekele also notes that you often see two main ways this works therapeutically. One is through excitation, using really strong, energetic rhythms, maybe to drive out negative forces or illness.
Right.
And the other is through relaxation, using more repetitive, calming music to try and restore harmony, both in the body and the mind. And both of these go way back. You find them all over.
It's not just the sound, is it? Imagination plays a really big part in this, too.
Oh, absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
Imagination, having visions, even dreams, they can transport the person, beyond their normal day-to-day experience.
Yeah.
And that can lead to this feeling of inner renewal, maybe even like a rebirth, which can be incredibly therapeutic.
That idea of music having transformative power, it definitely echoes some things from the Indian context. Now, if we look at the Hebrew Bible, are there examples there, music being used for healing or well-being?
Yes, definitely. The stories about King Saul are probably the most relevant here.
Okay.
There's one bit where music is said to have inspired prophecy, but maybe more directly for us, is that famous story of David playing the lyre to soothe Saul's evil spirit.
Right, I know that one.
In that story, David's playing maybe gentler, more meditative. It seemed to have this calming effect, right? That eased Saul's distress.
So you see both sides even there, the potentially more energetic, ecstatic side and the calming, soothing side. Okay, moving to Muslim traditions. It sounds like ecstatic rituals are pretty important for certain religious brotherhoods.
They are, yes. Groups like the Isawiya, the Hamadisha, the Gnawa, mainly in North Africa, they use these Hadra rituals.
Hadra.
Yeah, it's connected to the Sufi idea of sama, spiritual listening or concert. They use these rituals to induce trance states, often for healing or sometimes exorcism. The goal is often about clearing spiritual blockages, maybe by interacting with certain spiritual beings.
And the Moroccan Nawa specifically seem to have this really deep connection between music and their whole belief system.
They really do. For the Nawa, music isn't just, nice to listen to. It's seen as essential for understanding the universe. It's a vital part of their faith, their rituals. Their songs, the instruments, the dances, they're packed with symbolic meaning. Even the specific sound of their main instrument, the gumbre or the use of specific perfumes during their rituals. It's all significant.
Fascinating how they weave it all together, music, ritual, senses for healing, and spiritual connection. Now, what about the more, let's say, intellectual figures in Jewish and Muslim traditions, people like Maimonides? What did they think about music and well-being?
Maimonides, hugely influential physician and philosopher. He really recognized this deep psychological need for beauty. He saw it as just as important for health as, basic biological needs.
Really? Beauty is essential.
Yeah. He specifically recommended things like listening to songs and melodies, spending time in gardens, just being around beautiful sights as ways to lift melancholy and boost mental well-being.
So a conscious use of music and environment to affect your mental state. And he actually put music into medical advice for patients, didn't he?
He did, yes. In his advice for Al-Afdal, who was suffering from melancholy, Maimonides laid out this detailed plan that included using wine and music strategically to help him sleep.
Wow.
He even specified that the music should gradually get quieter as the patient drifted off. And he also recommended music after dinner to lift spirits and get rid of gloomy thoughts.
That's incredibly specific, thoughtful use of music in therapy. And his student, Ibn Aqwin, he also saw music as a potential cure for mental issues.
Absolutely, yeah. Ibn Aqwin believed music had the power to treat things like melancholy, where someone's view of reality gets kind of distorted and negative. He even named specific musical instruments he thought were particularly good for that.
It really feels like a growing awareness of music's direct effect on the mind. And then you have figures like Dawud al-Antaki connecting specific musical modes to medical uses.
Yes, al-Antaki, building on earlier ideas, he included in his big medical encyclopedia specific medical uses for different rhythmic modes in music.
Rhythmic modes.
Yeah. And around the same time, other musical writings also started assigning specific healing properties to different art music modes, suggesting, for instance, that maybe this mode was good for hemiplegia, or that one could help recovery from acute illness.
That's getting very specific, almost like prescribing music for certain conditions. Was there any sign of music being used in actual hospitals back then?
Interestingly, yes, there's some early evidence. The Brethren of Purity, that 10th century intellectual group, they hinted at a specific musical mode being used in hospitals at dawn, just to give solace to patients, ease their pain.
At dawn, right?
And then later on, we get more definite accounts of musical performances in hospitals in places like Cairo and Damascus. The Bayezid II Hospital in Adern even had specific budget lines for singers and musicians.
No kidding.
Yeah, specifically to provide nourishment for the soul for patients with mental illness.
That is truly amazing. Integrating music right into hospital care for mental health centuries ago. There's also that strange story, isn't there, about a powerful instrument in Byzantine hospitals that could heal or harm.
Yes. Al-Hujwiri tells that fascinating story about the angelium,
Angelium.
a stringed instrument apparently used in Byzantine hospitals. The belief was, listen for a certain amount of time, it's therapeutic. Listen for too long, potentially harmful, even deadly.
Yikes.
And you find variations of this story in other Arabic sources too. Sometimes they mentioned incredibly loud instruments used in war purely for their psychological effect on the enemy.
It really underscores that understanding of music as potent. Like any powerful tool, depends how you use it.
Yeah.
And even the great philosopher of music, Al-Farabi, he talked about extreme sounds having effects, right? Curative or toxic.
Exactly, yeah. Al-Farabi linked specific kinds of sounds and the instruments making them to particular results, including using them strategically in battle for that psychological edge.
It seems like in these traditions, especially during that golden age of Muslim civilization, there was this real intellectual drive to understand the music medicine connection, heavily influenced by Greek science and philosophy.
Absolutely. The translation and intense study of Greek medical and philosophical texts just sparked this whole new era of inquiry.
Right.
There was this strong belief in universal wisdom, something accessible through reason, through observation, and that led to these more complex theories linking music and medicine, and the whole concept of insomnia.
Insomnia.
Often translated as humanity or maybe humaneness. It provided this broader ethical, intellectual background for all these scientific explorations.
And a core idea shaping their approach was this holistic view, body and soul are connected, interdependent. That must have affected how they thought about healing.
Precisely, yeah. Physicians back then weren't just aiming to fix the physical problem, but to restore this inner harmony in the whole person. They were hugely influenced by Greek figures like Hippocrates and Galen, of course, and medical training often included secular subjects like philosophy.
And we also see these collections of pithy sayings or aphorisms about music attributed to Greek philosophers that got picked up and spread around by thinkers in both Jewish and Muslim circles.
Yes, those little nuggets of wisdom. They covered all sorts of things about music's influence, moral, ethical aspects, therapeutic potential, and they were often interpreted metaphorically. The fact they were so widely adopted shows this shared intellectual background, this common way of thinking about music's effects.
And that ancient theory of the four humors, which was so dominant in medicine then, that played a part too in how they thought music affected health.
Oh, absolutely. The belief that the body had four basic humors linked to the four elements that heavily influenced how they understood temperament, health, illness.
Right.
And music was thought to be able to affect the balance of those humors. They even believed in astral influences on health, suggesting doctors should maybe check horoscopes or astrological cycles too.
Wow. Now, major figures like Al-Kindi and that group, the Brethren of Purity, they really developed these ideas, didn't they? With harmony becoming this key central concept.
Al-Kindi, yes. A real polymath physician, philosopher. He saw harmony as the fundamental principle linking music to everything, the cosmos, ethics, therapy. He famously called the ud.
The lute-like instrument.
Exactly. The ud, he called it the instrument of philosophers because it represented this universal harmony. And the Brethren of Purity later on, they also really focused on the science of proportions, of harmony in music, as the key to understanding the universe and also influencing the body by balancing the humors.
So the ideal figure becomes the musician-philosopher, someone who deeply understands this universal harmony and can therefore use music effectively for therapy.
Exactly. That was the idea. That proper, effective therapeutic use of music needed this really profound understanding of harmony, both cosmic and musical.
But not everyone thought the doctor should be the musician.
Right. Some thinkers, like Ibn Hindu, suggested that, well, physicians absolutely needed to understand music's therapeutic potential, know about the modes and their effects, but they should probably leave the actual playing to expert musicians, use their expertise for the practical application.
That makes sense. Well, this has been a truly fascinating journey through these really diverse historical views. So as we kind of wrap up this exploration, what's the big message, the key thing we should take away about how these traditions saw music and well-being?
I think the main takeaway, really, is that across these very different historical traditions, Indian, Jewish, Muslim music was consistently seen as this potent force, something capable of influencing us on physical, mental, even spiritual levels. Now, the specific ways they explained it, the practices they used, those varied a lot, of course. But that underlying belief in music's potential for healing, it was remarkably persistent, remarkably widespread.
We've definitely hit some real aha moments, haven't we? Thinking about those early links in India, the detailed musical plans from Maimonides, the fact that music was actually used in early Islamic hospitals. It really broadens the picture of how long people have been thinking about this in such varied ways.
It really does. And maybe leaves a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. Thinking about these rich historical perspectives, how could our own understanding of music's role in well-being be enriched today? Are there maybe overlooked possibilities that these ancient traditions hint at for how we approach health and healing now? Certainly a compelling question to think about.